Today I'm going to show you how I drew this octopus using the Derwent Lightfast colored pencils. For today's project, I am working with the set of 72. Now, new colors have come out and will be available soon. I'm not sure if they're available everywhere yet or not, but I will have those shortly, and we will do another video talking about the additional colors. But here, you can see what comes in the set of 72. Beautiful colors. The blues and purples especially are just absolutely amazing. Some of my must-have pencils at this point. They're so nice. You can see that it's very easy to read the writing on the pencils, which is pretty handy, especially for those of us with poor eyesight. And just for transparency, these pencils were provided to me by Derwent, but all of the opinions in this video are my own. Now, before we get started, if you are members over at Patreon, make sure to head over where you've got over 3 hours of footage for this lesson. So if you are looking for a slower version of this, that may be a great fit for you. If you are unfamiliar with Patreon, for as little as $4 a month, you get access to all of my longer tutorials. I have a new one every single week, and as soon as you sign up, you get access to over 150 of my previous tutorials available to watch right now. If you're not sure if Patreon is going to be a fit for you, head over to my Patreon video library, where I have a 2-hour colored pencil lesson that you can see if that teaching style is going to work out for you, and that is completely free just for heading over and checking that out. The link will be in the video description. For this one, I am working on the Arches Hot Press watercolor paper. It is taped down with an acid-free or pH-neutral masking tape, and I'll have links to all of the supplies that I'm using in the video description. I'm starting by blocking in the rock here. I want to let my colors overlap a bit so I get that really soft, somewhat out of focus look. If you have very harsh edges, it's going to pull that area into focus. I really want the octopus to stand out here, so I'm going to keep everything pretty soft. I am blending this out with odorless mineral spirits. It is not water. For some reason, everyone keeps asking me if I'm using water for that. Water will not work on colored pencils because colored pencils are wax and oil based. Now, something that is a very big deal when you're working with odorless mineral spirits to blend, you need to have a lot of colored pencil on the paper. You want a decent amount of pigment. You don't want to put a light layer and then expect the odorless mineral spirits to work like water on watercolor pencils would. You're going to want multiple layers of the colored pencil. I would say at least 3 to 5 layers before you blend out with the odorless mineral spirits to get the best results. Now, if you were to use odorless mineral spirits and realized, oh my gosh, I didn't have enough pigment, it just made it look really faded. It didn't give me the deep, rich colors I'm looking for. It's not a big deal. Just put another layer on top. You've not ruined anything. You just need more layers. I am not pushing very hard with my pencils. I want to keep a light hand so that I don't damage the tooth of the paper, which is going to allow me to apply even more layers later on. One of the things that we're always kind of fighting with colored pencil, if you push too hard when you're using a watercolor paper or something similar, you can flatten the tooth out and then the pencil won't really stick very well. So if I apply a whole lot of very light layers, it gives me more control as I'm building everything up. Your first few layers, they're not going to look very good. As you can see here, it looks kind of like a kid's coloring book. It doesn't have that realism that we're going for. That's okay, and it is totally normal for your first layers. It's going to take a lot of layers to get this to be the depth that you want, or the color saturation, I should say, that you want. And these pencils have so much color saturation. They're really nice. I found I didn't need to do as many layers as I expected to get my background as saturated as I wanted it to be. They blend really nicely with the odorless mineral spirits too. Even if I'm being fairly sloppy and kind of sketchy and not getting everything laid down initially super smooth, I found when I went over it with the odorless mineral spirits, it blended out a lot of my laziness. Here I'm layering black into the blue, and then I'll put the blue right back on top so I get a lot of depth in that. I don't want to use straight black for the dark area of the water because it's going to have a very flat look. Now, I am a huge fan of using black pencils and black paint. I'm not opposed to that. I know some artists are. I'm not, but I very rarely will leave black on its own. I almost always layer another color on top of it, and that's going to allow me to have that nice, deep, rich color without being just flat black. Now we're going to go ahead and get started on his arms. Part of that was done during the live stream. I will put a link to that in the video description if you want to see me working a little bit there in real time. And what you want to do is just break everything down into abstract shapes. If you're looking at this, and this is going to be true for most subjects that you're painting, if you look at it as I'm drawing an octopus or I'm drawing a flower, your brain kind of takes over and tries to convince you of what it thinks an octopus or a flower or whatever it is that you're drawing is. Instead, zoom in on your reference photo. I like to have my reference photo on a laptop next to me. I can really zoom in on that photo and just focus on that one area. And when we're focused just here, it looks like abstract shapes. Just copy the abstract shapes you see in your reference photo. Now, I am adjusting my color hugely from what my reference photo was. This guy in the reference photo were more browns and grays, very dull. I wanted to use a lot of these bright violets and orange colors and really take advantage of these beautiful colors that come in this set of pencils. Now with pretty much everything, the colors aren't as big of a deal. Your values are. If you are struggling to get your work to look more realistic, focus on your values. Make sure your darks are dark enough and your lights are light enough. If you don't have that, if you keep everything in the mid-range where it feels safe, everything's just not super dark, not super light, it's boring to look at. But the thing is, it also ends up looking very flat, a little bit more cartoony. Here, I've completely adjusted the color from what my reference photo was, but he still looks realistic because my values are there. My darks are dark enough, my lights are light enough, and it gives you that more three-dimensional look that you're not going to have if your values aren't correct. So your values are really what you want to focus on more than which colors you choose. As I said, here, completely different colors from that reference photo, but he still looks realistic. If anything, he looks like he has more depth to him than the reference photo did because I hyped up that contrast a bit more from what my reference was. Adding a little bit more into the rock here. But I'm still going to keep this fairly soft because I really want the focus on the octopus. Blending that out again with the odorless mineral spirits. And I'm using a taklon bristled filbert to do the blending there. These pencils are listed as an oil-based pencil, but they feel to me somewhere between the oil and wax-based pencils of other brands that I use, which is a really nice balance. They've got the opacity and they blend beautifully. So if you're trying to do skin tones, anything like that, you get that really nice, soft blending. The color saturation is great, but they're also the lead is a bit harder than the wax-based leads. So they're not as prone to breaking when I sharpen them to a fine point. They're not quite as hard though as the oil-based pencils that I use. So they do, if you sharpen to a fine point and push very hard, the ends are going to break a little bit more. So that's why I say it's somewhere to me in between, like as far as the performance goes, it feels somewhere in the middle of a wax and oil-based pencil, which just brings out some of my favorite qualities of both types of pencils. They are definitely on my top 3 list. I'd say they're on my top 2 favorite list of colored pencils. Now for a lot of this, I do switch over to my Derwent Drawing Chinese white pencil because it is more opaque. It has a higher wax content, very, very opaque pencil, that one right there that I'm using, but it also is very soft. So I can't get the pencil sharpened to a super, super fine point and add much pressure because of it being so soft, it's going to be more prone to breaking. So when I need a really sharp or I'm going to add a lot of pressure, I'm going to switch over to the Lightfast white pencil. But it's not quite as opaque as that Derwent Drawing. The Derwent Drawing Chinese white really is the most opaque white colored pencil that I've found. And you can mix your different brands of colored pencil. They all work together beautifully. Any of your wax and oil-based pencils will all work nicely together. It doesn't matter which one you put on top of the other. I've had people ask, can I put my wax base down first or my oil base down first? It really makes no difference. All of the pencils have some wax and oil in them, and they all layer on top of each other nice in any order that works for you. Again, just looking at abstract shapes, because when you look at this as a whole, it gets very overwhelming. Zoom in on one little area that you're going to focus on and look at your reference photo. And here is great because it doesn't have to be exact. It's not going to make a big difference if I'm missing one of his little suction cups. If I work on, let's say, a portrait and the eye is missing, obviously, not so forgiving. But for an octopus or florals, things like that, landscapes, if something is a little off, no one's really going to know the difference. So it's a very forgiving subject. It's tedious. There's a lot of detail, but don't be afraid to work on this thinking, oh my gosh, something like this would be too hard. No, when you've got more detail like this, it's very forgiving, because if you're missing something, people are probably not going to notice. Whereas if you work on something like a portrait, that's going to be a lot more precise. You have to be very exact on the eyes, the nose, the mouth. Everything has to be in the exact right place. So when you're getting started, stuff like this that's very, very busy is a much easier way, I think, to get an instant win or feel like you've accomplished something really good, because as long as you've got the patience. It's just tedious. There's a lot of work, a lot of little detail. So this is sped up to just 15 minutes or so. I spent 2 weeks working on this. So keep that in mind when you're watching a lot of these speed tutorials. They give the impression that things are done in a much faster, I mean, obviously you know they're sped up, but I don't think people will realize the extent that we speed these up to fit this onto a YouTube video. Take your time. Don't get frustrated. Don't expect something to be finished in 1 or 2 nights. This was 2 weeks worth of work for me. To get my brightest highlights on here, I'm using a product from brushandpencil.com. You guys, if you've been around for very long, have seen me use this a lot. It's a combination of their touch-up texture and titanium white mixture, and I'm using a paintbrush to paint this on. This is archival. It adheres very well to the colored pencil. It is the only archival product you have, or that is available, that you can paint on top of colored pencil and have it be archival. Acrylic paint, gel pens, all of those, they can flake off over time. They are not meant to go on top of a wax or oil-based product, whereas that one is. And I'll put a link to a video showing you exactly how I use that product in the video description. It's wonderful for white highlights like this, or if you're doing animal fur or whiskers or anything like that. So nice. Again, that link will be in the description. Now, when you've got so much busyness like this going on, one of the best things you can do for yourself is set little mini goals. Like maybe for one night, all I'm going to work on is the eye. As long as I get the eye done, I know I've accomplished something. Or one of the arms. If you try to sit down and think, okay, I'm just going to start working as long as I can, it can start feeling really overwhelming. So in addition to breaking it down into one little abstract shape that you're focusing on, focus on 1 or 2 or maybe 3 square inches at a time, and only worry about finishing that. Don't worry about the rest of the piece. Don't rush yourself. If you can take your time and work slow, your work will come out so much better. That's one of the things that can make a night and day difference in your artwork. If you find that your work does not look right now how you want it to, and maybe you spend 2 hours or 3 or 4 hours on a piece, spend 4 times that amount. Or if you're spending 10 hours on a piece, again, 4 times that amount. Increase the amount of time. Make yourself sit there longer and just work on the piece longer. Pay attention to details. Pay attention to little stuff that before maybe you would have called it done. Now, once you think you're done, consider that maybe 1/4 of the way through. Challenge yourself to spend more time on your artwork. It will make such a huge difference. When I first started with painting and drawing, I really had this idea in my head that I should be able to get a painting done in 1 or 2 nights. It didn't even cross my mind that these artists who are creating these fabulous pieces that I was so in awe of were spending sometimes months, or well, in some cases, probably years to get that look. So more time on your work, in many cases, is really the main thing you need to do to push yourself to the next level. So you can see layering again. I start with a light base layer just to kind of block in or map in about where my lights and darks are going to be, about where the purples or the oranges are going to be. Then I come back through after I blended it out and really start working on those little details. Now for all of these little shapes on his head, I'm not concerned that they're exact to the reference photo. I just need them to be close, about the right size, about the right shape, moving in the same direction. But I'm not sitting there counting, okay, 15 going this direction, 30 going this direction. It's not that precise, and it really doesn't make a difference as far as the overall impact the piece has. As long as you can get it pretty close there. And adding shadows on top of that, blending it out with the odorless mineral spirits. Now, a tip with the odorless mineral spirits, my first few layers with that, I will have the more of the OMS on the brush. As I get to my final layers where I have a lot of colored pencil already on the paper, that brush is almost dry. It's barely damp. If you have too much odorless mineral spirits on the brush, when you have many layers already down on the paper, and I mean 15, 20 layers, when you get to that stage, if you have too much odorless mineral spirits on the brush, you'll start removing and smudging the pigment or the pencil more than you intend. So each additional layer, every time that I go through and blend out again with odorless mineral spirits, I'm using less and less of the odorless mineral spirits on that brush. Here, again, using the touch-up texture and titanium white mixture, look how wonderful that just pulls. It looks so pretty. I love the look of how shiny it makes everything. All these little details and these bright highlights that with colored pencil, I just can't get quite that bright unless I were to have left the white of the paper showing through, which is absolutely an option. But this saves me a lot of time. And then if I have areas that I want to not be quite as bright as what I put it down on with that product, I can let it dry and then put pencil right on top of it. It adds texture to the paper wherever you've applied it, so the pencil will stick really nicely. Few more details there. I went around the edge with an aqua color, which isn't necessarily scientifically correct. I'm making air quotes you can't see, but it's a look that I do a lot in my work just because I like how it looks, not because it's accurate that this was how the light would hit. I just think it looks pretty. As an artist, remember your reference photo is there as a guideline. Your work does not have to look exact to that reference photo to make a beautiful painting or drawing. And there is our final painting. If you have used these pencils, let me know. What did you think about them? Did you love them as much as I do? Have you subscribed yet? If not, I have a handy button right there. It's round, has an orange arrow going towards it. If you click on that, that'll help you to keep up to date with all of my new art videos every single week. Although YouTube's kind of bad about notifying people, so you may also want to click on the notification icon or sign up for my email newsletter.